Imagine walking into a restaurant expecting a simple meal, only to find yourself at the center of a public controversy. That's exactly what happened to Barron Trump when a simple hat sparked a heated debate. But instead of reacting with anger, he chose a different path, one that turned conflict into unity. Stay tuned as we dive into this powerful story of leadership, understanding, and the power of choosing dialogue over division. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in New York City, the kind that made the city feel alive with energy. Barron Trump, a young teenager, stepped out of a black SUV onto the bustling sidewalk of Manhattan's Upper East Side. He had just finished a morning of reading and decided to treat himself to lunch at the Empire Room, an upscale restaurant known for its exclusivity and refined clientele. It wasn't his first time dining there. He liked the quiet atmosphere and the impeccable service. As he walked toward the entrance, his bright red MAGA hat perched comfortably atop his head, he wasn't thinking about politics. To him, it was just a hat, a part of his identity, worn with ease rather than as a statement. The restaurant's glass doors swung open and he stepped inside, immediately greeted by the warmth of the dimly lit interior and the soft hum of quiet conversations. Clara Wells, the polished hostess in her early 30s, offered him a professional smile and escorted him to a corner table. He nodded in thanks, took a seat, and opened the menu. He was unaware that his choice of attire was about to set off a chain of events that would ripple far beyond this restaurant. As Barron settled into his seat, he absent-mindedly scanned the menu, unaware of the subtle shift in the restaurant's atmosphere. At first, it was barely noticeable. A lingering glance from a couple at a nearby table, a whispered exchange between two waiters near the bar. He had been here before without issue, but today, something felt different. Across the room, Richard Coleman, the restaurant's manager, had already noticed him. A man in his late 40s with a reputation for running a tightly controlled dining experience, Richard prided himself on maintaining the Empire Room's image of exclusivity. His eyes locked onto Barron's red MAGA hat and his jaw tightened. The restaurant had an unspoken policy, no overtly political symbols. It wasn't about siding with anyone, it was about keeping the space neutral, or so he had convinced himself. He sighed, setting down the tablet he had been using to check reservations. This was a situation he had to handle personally. Straightening his tie, Richard briskly approached Barron's table. "Excuse me, sir," Richard said, his voice firm but polite. "We have a policy against political attire in this establishment. I'll have to ask you to remove your hat." Barron looked up, his calm expression flickering with surprise. "I wasn't aware of any policy like that," he replied, his voice steady, not confrontational. Richard gestured vaguely toward the entrance. "It's written in our code of conduct. We want this to be a neutral space for all guests." A few nearby diners had gone silent, their curiosity now fixed on the unfolding exchange. The tension in the air was thick, lingering like a storm about to break. Barron studied the manager for a moment, his expression unreadable. He could feel the weight of the room pressing in, the quiet stares, the hushed whispers. He wasn't here to cause trouble, nor was he looking for an argument. He had simply come for lunch. Keeping his composure, he leaned back slightly in his chair. "I understand you have policies," he said evenly, "but I don't see how a hat disrupts anyone's dining experience." Richard's stance stiffened. "It's not about the hat itself, it's about what it represents. We aim to keep the Empire Room free from political distractions." Barron exhaled softly, glancing around. Some diners were avoiding eye contact, pretending to be immersed in their meals, while others openly observed, their curiosity evident. He knew he could argue the point, stand his ground, but to what end? He had been taught that there was a time to speak and a time to walk away. Without another word, Barron reached for his phone and earbuds, neatly placing them in his pocket. Then, with deliberate calmness, he pushed his chair back and stood. "If that's how you feel, then I'll leave," he said, his voice steady. The silence in the restaurant deepened. As he adjusted the strap of his bag over his shoulder, a waiter near the bar shifted uncomfortably, as if wanting to say something but thinking better of it. Richard said nothing as Barron turned and made his way to the door. His movements unhurried, his posture relaxed. As the heavy glass doors swung shut behind him, the tension inside remained, thick and unresolved. Outside, Barron took a deep breath, feeling the cool autumn air on his face. He wasn't angry, frustrated maybe, but more than anything he was disappointed. As Barron walked away from the Empire Room, he pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his mother, letting her know what had happened. He wasn't seeking sympathy, just clarity. Was he overreacting, or was the manager's decision unfair? Within minutes, his phone began buzzing with replies from friends. "That's ridiculous. They shouldn't have treated you like that." Another message read, "Freedom of expression doesn't stop at a restaurant door." Barron sighed, shaking his head slightly. He hadn't intended to cause a stir, but it seemed the moment was already growing bigger than him. By the time he got home, the incident had taken on a life of its own. A fellow diner had snapped a blurry photo of him leaving the restaurant and posted it online with the caption, "They kicked out Barron Trump over a hat." The post spread rapidly, and within hours it was everywhere. Social media erupted with debates. Some supported the restaurant's right to enforce its policies, arguing that private businesses had the freedom to decide their rules. Others saw it as an example of political bias, accusing the Empire Room of selective intolerance. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Articles with headlines like "Barron Trump denied service in NYC restaurant" began circulating. Influencers weighed in, some defending Barron's right to wear the hat, while others praised the restaurant for upholding its policy. Meanwhile, the Empire Room's social media pages were flooded with comments. Some customers canceled their reservations, while others voiced their approval of the manager's decision. Back at the restaurant, Richard Coleman sat in his office, scrolling through the waves of notifications. The situation was spiraling, and for the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Had he made the right call? Sitting at his desk, Barron scrolled through the countless posts, articles, and comments flooding social media. Some people were outraged on his behalf, while others dismissed the incident as justified. He could see how quickly it was becoming another online battlefield, one side calling for a boycott of the Empire Room, the other defending the restaurant's decision. The noise was deafening, but Barron wasn't interested in adding to it. He wasn't looking for sympathy, nor did he want to be at the center of yet another divisive debate. Instead, he wanted to do something meaningful, something that would turn this controversy into an opportunity for connection rather than conflict. Grabbing his leather-bound notebook, he began jotting down ideas. What was the real issue here? It wasn't just about a hat. It was about the way people shut each other out, the way dialogue had been replaced with division. He had no interest in retaliation. What good would that do? But maybe, just maybe, he could shift the conversation towards something positive. Then it hit him. A public fundraiser. Not as a protest, but as a way to bring people together. He envisioned an event focused on unity, free speech, and civil discourse. A gathering where people with different perspectives could talk, listen, and understand one another. And there was no better place to hold it than right outside the Empire Room, the very restaurant where this all began. Picking up his phone, Barron started making calls, first to a few close friends who had already texted their support, then to local charities that focused on youth mentorship and community building. "Hey," he said into the receiver, his voice steady with purpose. "I need your help with something." One conversation led to another, and soon the pieces started falling into place. He reached out to organizers who could help with logistics. He contacted vendors who might donate food and drinks. He even considered inviting speakers, people who could facilitate discussions on respectful disagreement and open dialogue. The idea wasn't about taking sides. It was about finding common ground. As the evening stretched on, Barron worked tirelessly to shape the event into something bigger than just a reaction. This wasn't about revenge, and it wasn't about proving a point. It was about creating a space where people, regardless of their beliefs, could come together, because at the end of the day, unity wasn't about agreeing on everything. It was about respecting each other despite our differences. The next morning, Barron woke up to a flood of new messages, texts, emails, and social media notifications from people wanting to help. What had started as a simple idea was now gaining momentum. His friends were eager to pitch in, and several local organizations expressed interest in supporting the event. The fundraiser wasn't just about responding to the restaurant incident anymore. It was shaping into something bigger, something that could genuinely bring people together. He and his team secured a public plaza right outside the Empire Room as the venue. They started making arrangements, setting up donation booths, inviting food vendors, and planning live music performances to create a welcoming atmosphere. By noon, his event had a name: United We Stand, Building Bridges, Not Walls. A bold banner with the phrase was designed to hang over the stage, reinforcing the message of unity and constructive dialogue. The fundraiser would benefit local youth mentorship programs and community building initiatives, giving the event a clear purpose beyond just symbolism. Meanwhile, inside the Empire Room, the tension among the staff was growing. Reservations were being canceled, and whispers about the fallout spread through the restaurant. Some employees peeked through the windows, curious about the preparations taking place outside. The energy on the street was undeniable. Richard Coleman, the restaurant's manager, scrolled through his phone in his office, seeing post after post about the upcoming event. The more he read, the more uneasy he became. He had expected backlash, maybe even some bad press, but he hadn't expected this. Barron Trump hadn't retaliated. He hadn't called for boycotts or made inflammatory statements. Instead, he had chosen to create something positive, and for the first time since the incident, Richard wondered if he had made a mistake. By noon, the public plaza outside the Empire Room was buzzing with energy. Volunteers worked swiftly, setting up tables, stringing up banners, and arranging donation booths. A small stage stood at the center of it all, framed by the bold lettering, United We Stand, Building Bridges, Not Walls. The event had started as an idea, but now it had become something tangible, something powerful. People from all walks of life began to arrive: families, professionals, students, and even a few familiar faces from the social media world. Some had come out of curiosity, others out of support, but they were all there for the same reason: to be part of something meaningful. Barron moved through the crowd, shaking hands, thanking volunteers, and making sure everything was running smoothly. He wasn't interested in being the center of attention, but as the driving force behind the event, people naturally gravitated toward him. The mood was light yet purposeful, a stark contrast to the tension that had surrounded the original incident. Food trucks lined one side of the plaza, offering free meals to attendees, while donation stations collected funds for community building initiatives. Inside the Empire Room, the atmosphere was very different. The usually bustling dining room was half empty. Some of the remaining diners kept glancing toward the windows, as if drawn to the movement and energy outside. Even some of the restaurant staff were sneaking peeks. Richard Coleman stood at the bar, arms crossed, watching the event unfold. He had expected protests, anger, maybe even calls for his business to be shut down, but instead Barron had turned the moment into something unifying. The weight of that realization sat heavily on his shoulders. For the first time since the incident, he wasn't sure if he had made the right choice. Richard Coleman stood near the window of the Empire Room, watching the event unfold outside. The energy in the plaza was undeniable, people talking, laughing, engaging with one another in a way that felt refreshingly genuine. He had expected outrage, calls for boycotts, or maybe even protesters chanting outside his doors. Instead, Barron Trump had responded with something entirely different: unity, and it was working. Inside the restaurant, the contrast was stark. The once lively dining room was noticeably quieter, with more empty tables than usual. A few of his regulars had canceled their reservations, and those who had come seemed distracted, occasionally glancing toward the windows as if debating whether they should be out there instead. A waiter approached Richard hesitantly. "Some customers have been asking about the event," he said. "They say it looks incredible." Richard didn't respond right away. He had built a reputation for maintaining control, for making decisions that protected the Empire Room's exclusive image. But now, as he stood there watching his staff glance outside with curiosity, and his restaurant grow emptier by the minute, a thought gnawed at him. Had he really made the right call that day? Or had his decision, meant to keep things neutral, done exactly the opposite? Richard took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and made his way toward the door. As he stepped outside, the lively hum of the event filled his ears. Music playing, conversations flowing, and people gathered around donation booths. The crowd noticed him immediately. A subtle shift in energy as eyes turned his way. Some looked curious, others skeptical. But at the center of it all, Barron Trump stood near the stage, speaking with a group of volunteers. Barron spotted Richard approaching and offered a small, polite smile. He didn't flinch or step back. Instead, he extended his hand. Richard hesitated for a moment before shaking it. "I need to start by saying, I didn't handle things well the other day," Richard admitted, his voice low enough that only Barron could hear. "I thought I was protecting my restaurant, keeping things neutral, but I see now that I may have done the opposite." Barron nodded, appreciating the honesty. "It takes a lot to admit that," he said sincerely. "I'm not looking to hold grudges. I just want to show that we don't have to be divided over differences." Richard exhaled. "I'd like to be part of that. If there's a way the Empire Room can contribute, I want to help." Barron considered for a moment. "What if we host an event like this together? Something that actually brings people in rather than pushes them away?" Richard blinked, caught off guard by the suggestion. Then, after a moment, a small smile formed. "Let's make it happen." The two shook hands again, and from the crowd a wave of applause rippled through the plaza. A moment of conflict had become a moment of understanding, and something new was about to begin. Richard took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and made his way toward the door. As he stepped outside, the lively hum of the event filled his ears. Music playing, conversations flowing, and people gathered around donation booths. The crowd noticed him immediately, a subtle shift in energy as eyes turned his way. Some looked curious, others skeptical. But at the center of it all, Barron Trump stood near the stage, speaking with a group of volunteers. Barron spotted Richard approaching and offered a small, polite smile. He didn't flinch or step back. Instead, he extended his hand. Richard hesitated for a moment before shaking it. "I need to start by saying, I didn't handle things well the other day," Richard admitted, his voice low enough that only Barron could hear. "I thought I was protecting my restaurant, keeping things neutral, but I see now that I may have done the opposite." Barron nodded, appreciating the honesty. "It takes a lot to admit that," he said sincerely. "I'm not looking to hold grudges. I just want to show that we don't have to be divided over differences." Richard exhaled. "I'd like to be part of that. If there's a way the Empire Room can contribute, I want to help." Barron considered for a moment. "What if we host an event like this together? Something that actually brings people in rather than pushes them away?" Richard blinked, caught off guard by the suggestion. Then, after a moment, a small smile formed. "Let's make it happen." The two shook hands again, and from the crowd a wave of applause rippled through the plaza. A moment of conflict had become a moment of understanding, and something new was about to begin.